ESN TV coverage of the 12th Annual Consortium for School Networking Conference is sponsored by Smart Technologies, N Computing, and CCC Video on Demand, in cooperation with Cable in the Classroom and Consortium for School Networking.
One of the key themes to emerge at COSN's annual conference in San Francisco is the need for schools to re-engage today's generation of learners. And a big advocate of that idea is Lord David Puttnam of Great Britain, who sat down with these school news to discuss how today's schools should change for the 21st century.
This eSchool News interview from the 12th Annual COSN Conference will continue after this message.
N Computing's mission is to get a computing station in front of every student at every school. Our technology works by installing an N Computing PCI card into a normal desktop PC. You then take a simple networking cable and connect it to an N Station box. All you have to do then is install our software, a monitor, mouse, and keyboard, and you are ready to go. With the N Computing stations, you can expand one host by up to 7 stations. This means that effectively you are turning one PC into the equivalent of 7 PCs for a fraction of the cost of buying a new PC.
As a filmmaker, Lord David Puttnam has made several highly acclaimed films, including The Mission, The Killing Fields, and Chariots of Fire. He's the only non-American to lead a major Hollywood studio, having run Columbia Pictures in the 1980s. I asked Lord Puttnam what he believes education could learn from the entertainment industry.
I think probably the most important thing is who its audience is. I mean, you know, I was sometimes accused of making slightly high-minded films, but I always knew that eventually I'd have to find an audience with them. And so you actually tailor your offering to an extent to that audience. One of the reasons I retired from the film industry when I was 55 is because it became increasingly obvious that the film audience was remorselessly sort of 16 to 24, and I was remorselessly getting older, and the gap between us was not going to diminish. So I think the ability to the ability to understand what the audience is and to tailor the product, in our case, in the case of education, the product being learning, to the audience. That, to an extent, has been true of education down the ages. But one of the reasons I was here at the conference is to try and make the point that we've also got to go to where the audience is and what platforms the audience are adjusted to. And I see that as representing much more of an opportunity than a threat. I equally happen to believe that unless we make that shift, then the nature of the threat could come along and overwhelm us, because if we allow a growing disparity between the way in which young people receive information, deal with information in their own time and during their own lives, and the way in which they're expected to do exactly the same thing effectively at school, if that disparity is allowed to grow, it'll turn into a chasm, and sooner or later kids will say, I don't understand this has got nothing to do with me, it has nothing to do with the way in which I live my life, it's got nothing to do with the way in which I receive information, and worse, it's got nothing to do with the way in which I will continue to live my life once I leave school. So there'll be this, I'm terrified of this discontinuity between the nature of education and the nature of real life.
Lord Puttnam spoke at a pre-conference symposium on using games and simulations to better engage students. His message?
We may be sucking our teeth in the education sector and wishing to kind of pick and choose what we do or don't want to engage with. But the truth is that the Microsofts and the Murdochs and the Googles and the Yahoos of the world, they're moving ahead. And they, in a sense, have captured our children. They have our children. So in a sense, we have to either make common cause with them, or we have to step up to the plate and insist that at least the ethos of learning that educators are adjusted to and educators are comfortable with, becomes the dominant ethos. Otherwise, we're going to effectively surrender even the ethos of learning to commercial enterprises. I don't want to see that happen.
In 1997, Lord Puttnam was invited by the UK to join its education department. In his service to that nation's government, he started a national teaching award system to improve teacher morale and recognize best practices. He's also leading a push to train Britain's teachers in the use of interactive whiteboards.
I'm a huge fan of interactive whiteboards. I think interactive whiteboards are an amazing creation, but there was a sense that interactive whiteboards were being sold literally just shifting boards without any of the requisite or sufficient requisite training to go with the teachers. So what we had was this brilliant platform, potentially brilliant learning platform, but inadequately trained teachers. And again, so I tried to flag that up, and we've been working on ways in which we can address that issue.
This eSchool News interview from the 12th Annual COSN Conference will continue after this message.
The interactive whiteboard is immediately impressive. They have found an increase in student participation, and that is also translated into higher test scores. Synchronize is a classroom management product that runs on the laptops of the students as well as the teacher. Synchronize allows that teacher to effectively manage the students in a one-to-one environment. Bridget is our conferencing software. Bridget really becomes a very valuable tool for delivering online learning. The Centio student response system allows the teachers to present questions to students and allow them to respond and answer in their own way. The benefit of being able to go to one solution provider to get the seamless integration of all the products working together in that environment.
Lord Puttnam will head up the UK's Open University later this year. As Great Britain's largest university, it reaches students who can't attend school full-time.
It was a brilliant creation in the late 1960s. The first graduating students left in '73. It was the first genuinely open university. That's to say, it was a university for people who could work part-time, correspondence courses principally in the early days, and had a staggering effect on Britain. We've now graduated over 2 million people. We have 220,000 students a year going through the university. But, like everything else, it's an in danger of being an institution that either rests on its laurels or gets bypassed by technology. And so the job at the Open University is to, in a sense, reinvent what is the Open University of the 21st century. I'll have the privilege of being Chancellor of the Open University of the 20th century, which was in itself an immense breakthrough. But how much of that is relevant, and how much of that can progress through to delivering learning in the 21st century? Originally, it was a television delivered and a correspondence course delivered. It was a mix and match between television and correspondence course. The television component of it, the off-air live component, is almost gone now, all but gone. So much of that is transferred to online. But I have a feeling, and I can't articulate it yet, that there is another whole stride we can take, another whole step that we could take to make it that much more pertinent to the world that we're moving into.
CCC, the new leader in video on demand, offers the best in core curriculum content, not recycled television. Our content partners are the nation's most respected producers of educational media. CCC offers thousands of programs and tens of thousands of teaching segments, all correlated to state, national, and Canadian standards. It's education, not edutainment. For more information on CCC Video on Demand, visit ndmccc.com.